Markets opened on edge today as geopolitics, trade tensions, and currency moves converged to test investor nerves. From Alaska's frosty diplomacy table to Africa's currency shifts and Europe's corporate takeover buzz, the day's stories reveal how deeply interconnected politics and economics remain. My name is Eniola Lunge, and here's today's Zoom Out for August 15, where I help you see the bigger picture. In a rare in-person meeting, U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin met in Alaska for high-stakes talks with discussions reportedly centered on potential ceasefire frameworks in Ukraine. The meeting comes as the war continues to strain global energy supply chains, particularly in Europe, and amid pressure from oil and gas markets seeking stability. While no deal has been announced, any movement toward a ceasefire could ease geopolitical risk premiums baked into oil and natural gas prices. However, analysts warn that even a partial truce could come with complex trade-offs involving sanctions relief and military guarantees. So what's your Zoom Out takeaway? When geopolitics and commodities intersect, markets don't wait for signed deals. They price in expectations. A credible ceasefire pathway could recalibrate global energy flows and inflation expectations almost overnight. President Trump announced fresh tariffs on imported semiconductors and steel, aimed at boosting domestic manufacturing. While the White House says the move will restore supply chain sovereignty, markets are wary of retaliatory measures from major trading partners, particularly in Asia. The semiconductor sector, already grappling with cyclical demand shifts, faces heightened uncertainty, especially for U.S. companies reliant on Asian suppliers. Steel tariffs could also ripple through construction, auto manufacturing, and heavy industry, potentially raising costs. So what's your Zoom Out takeaway? Trade wars have a habit of spilling beyond their intended targets. Investors and policymakers alike should watch whether this sparks a broader tariff tit-for-tat that could slow global growth momentum. Nigeria's July inflation data showed a modest slowdown, offering some relief after months of accelerating price pressures. However, food inflation remains elevated, reflecting supply chain bottlenecks, currency pressures, and high imports dependency. For households, this means the cost of living remains under strain. And for policymakers, the central bank's room to cut rates remains limited without risking further currency weakness. So what's your Zoom Out takeaway? Headline inflation numbers can mask the pain on the ground. In food-driven economies, what matters most for stability isn't the headline figure. It's whether people can afford to eat or not. The South African rand has strengthened slightly, buoyed by rising gold prices, a traditional safe haven asset. Gold's rally is partly driven by geopolitical uncertainty and expectations of looser monetary policy in some major economies. Markets are now watching next week's South African inflation data closely. A cooler print could give the rand more breathing room, while a hotter number might revive pressure for further rate hikes. So what's your Zoom Out takeaway? In commodity-linked currencies, global market forces often matter as much as domestic policy. For South Africa, gold's glow can temporarily offset macro headwinds, but it's no substitute for structural economic fixes. Swiss wireless and positioning chipmaker u-blox is in preliminary talks with U.S. private equity giant Advent International for a potential takeover that could be valued at over 1 billion Swiss francs. The move comes amid consolidation in the global semiconductor industry, where competition, geopolitical risk, and heavy R&D costs are driving mergers and acquisitions. A successful deal could position Advent to tap into growing demand for connected devices and industrial Internet of Things applications. So what's your Zoom Out takeaway? Chip makers aren't just caught in trade disputes. They are in a consolidation wave. As the cost of staying competitive rises, expect more cross-border deals that blend capital muscle with technical expertise. So the bottom line is this: from Alaska's power diplomacy to Africa's inflation pulse and Europe's corporate maneuvers, today's stories all point to one thing: Economic positioning is as much about timing as it is about strategy. In a world where tariffs can shift supply chains and commodity prices can sway currencies, the ability to read multiple signals at once is an investor's real edge. What story stood out to you today? Drop a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more context with me. When the world zooms in on the noise, I zoom out so you can see the bigger picture.